Welcome to the sleep hours. Tonight is one of those quiet nights. When the world seems to turn a little slower and the sky sits heavy with stars, there are stories that drift through time like gentle currents. And among them, there is one that begins not with thunder or prophecy shouted to the heavens, but with a simple stretch of suburban road, where every house looked exactly like the next, and every window glowed with an ordinary warmth. This is where our story opens, on Privet Drive, a place that prided itself on never inviting anything strange. Yet destiny has never been known to knock politely. Long before the wizarding world would learn his name, a baby wrapped in a blanket lay sleeping outside number 4. He had a tiny, lightning-shaped scar upon his forehead, and a quiet calm about him, as if even in infancy he understood more than he could ever say. The adults who placed him there, an elderly wizard with half-moon spectacles, a stern woman with eyes like sharpened silver, and a giant towering gently above them, knew the child was stepping into a world that would never be simple. But they also knew he would be safe here, at least for a time. And so Harry Potter began his life not in a castle of magic, but in a cupboard under the stairs. Years passed slowly, softly, and not always kindly. Harry's days were filled with hand-me-down clothes, much too big for him, whispered complaints from relatives who wished he wasn't there, and chores that seemed to pile endlessly. Yet through all of this, something quietly extraordinary lived within him. Birds perched on his windowsill as if drawn to him. Strange things happened when he was frightened or sad. Glass vanished. Hair grew back overnight. Doors unlocked without reason. Magic, though unnamed, curled around him like a sleeping creature waiting to wake. And then came the letters. They arrived politely at first, addressed in neat handwriting. Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. Harry never saw the early ones. His uncle made sure of that, but the house could not silence magic forever. More letters came, then dozens, then floods of them swirling through chimneys and cracks under doors, until it seemed the air itself was trying to reach him. It was not chaos, but a gentle insistence from another world calling him home. When the Dursleys fled the rain of letters and retreated to a lonely hut on a rocky island, the night seemed long and windswept, almost waiting. Close to midnight, the door shook, a soft knock, then a heavier one. And when it burst open, there stood the gentle giant Harry had once met, without knowing it, Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. His voice, deep and warm, filled the tiny hut like a hearth being lit. He handed Harry a slightly squashed birthday cake and spoke the words that would shift the world beneath his feet. "You're a wizard, Harry." What followed was not the rush of adventure people imagined, but something quieter and far more important. It was the feeling of belonging. Hagrid guided him through Diagon Alley, where cobblestone streets shimmered with enchantments and cauldrons clinked softly in shop windows. Owls hooted from perches above, and wands rested in dusty boxes as if waiting for the right hands. When Harry's wand chose him, the shop fell still, and for a moment, the magic that had always slept inside him stirred awake, like a long-buried melody remembering its tune. Finally came the journey to Hogwarts. As the train whistle echoed softly, Harry sat beside his new companions, Ron Weasley with the crumbs of chocolate on his robes, and Hermione Granger with a determined brightness in her voice. The castle awaited them beyond Mist Hills, its towers rising like an ancient dream. And when Harry stepped into the great hall, candles floating above him and the sorting hat perched lightly on his head, he felt, for the first time in his life, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The great hall shimmered with the warm glow of thousands of candles, their tiny flames drifting softly above the long tables, like stars brought down from the ceiling. Harry looked around, taking it all in. The polished stone floor, the ghosts gliding gently between students, and the enchanted sky overhead that mirrored the night outside. It all felt impossible, yet deeply comforting, as if some missing piece of his life had fallen quietly into place. When the Sorting Hat settled onto his head, the world seemed to pause. In that hush, Harry heard a small, thoughtful voice whisper inside his mind, considering his bravery, his doubts, and the strange connection it sensed in him. After a brief but meaningful moment, the hat declared its choice: Gryffindor. The table erupted in cheers, and for the first time in years, Harry felt the warmth of belonging wrap around him like a cloak. Life at Hogwarts unfolded with a gentle rhythm, each day layered with discoveries. Early mornings carried the scent of old parchment and echoing laughter drifting from the common room. Lessons brought their own kind of wonder. Professor McGonagall teaching transfiguration with firm kindness. Professor Flitwick guiding delicate spells that sparkled in the air, and Hagrid leading them into the edges of the forbidden forest where creatures watched from the shadows. Even Professor Snape, with his low voice and unreadable stare, added a strange tension to Harry's days, as if he knew more about Harry's past than he ever admitted aloud. But magic was not the only mystery waiting for Harry. Strange whispers drifted through the corridors, and talk of a hidden object, the Philosopher's Stone, began circulating quietly among the teachers. A three-headed dog guarded a trapdoor, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione, drawn together by both curiosity and courage, found themselves at the center of something larger than schoolwork and Quidditch practice. They discovered that the stone was no ordinary treasure. It was a powerful artifact capable of granting immortality, and somewhere in the shadows, someone was trying to steal it. Despite the danger, the story of their first year was not loud or frantic. It was filled with soft moments of bravery. The three friends worked together, trusting each other more than they trusted themselves. They faced enchantments and trials layered deep beneath the castle, each more challenging than the last, until finally Harry stood face to face with a presence he had not been prepared for. Voldemort, weakened and bodiless, used another man's form to reach for the stone. Though Harry was only 11, the love of his mother, something ancient and protective, shielded him. Voldemort's attempt failed, and Harry survived, waking days later in the hospital wing with sunlight warming his bed and Dumbledore sitting quietly beside him. The school year ended with celebrations, warm feasts, and a sense of quiet triumph. Harry returned to Privet Drive for the summer, carrying inside him a new understanding of who he truly was. But magic doesn't rest for long, and when he returned for his second year, Hogwarts greeted him with familiar comfort, though its walls carried new warnings. Whispers began spreading through the corridors, unsettling murmurs about something ancient being disturbed. A message written in shimmering red letters appeared on a wall. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Students were found petrified, frozen in fear. Rumors swirled of monsters hidden for centuries, of dangers older than the school itself. But even in the rising tension, Hogwarts remained a place of learning, laughter, and friendship. Harry and Ron rushed to classes. Hermione solved puzzles with quiet brilliance, and together they pushed through uncertainty the way children often do, by staying close to one another. When Hermione became petrified, Harry and Ron felt the castle grow colder, its corridors heavier, yet they didn't stop searching. The truth finally led them deep beneath the school, into a chamber carved from ancient stone. There, Harry confronted a memory of the young Tom Riddle and the basilisk he controlled. With bravery far beyond his years, Harry fought the serpent with the help of Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, and destroyed the diary that held Riddle's shadow. The danger faded, life returned, and the school once again filled with joyful noise. Harry's first 2 years were marked with courage, friendship, and mysteries that slowly began connecting threads from his past to the future waiting for him. And although he didn't know it yet, the path ahead would grow deeper, darker, and far more revealing. The summer after his second year at Hogwarts felt heavier than the ones before. Harry returned to Privet Drive, carrying the weight of secrets he couldn't explain to anyone around him. The ordinary world seemed even quieter now, lacking the warmth and unpredictability of magic. Yet somewhere in the spaces between those long days, a shift was stirring, one that would change everything Harry thought he knew. It began with the arrival of Aunt Marge, whose visit unfolded with the usual tension the Dursleys reserved for anything involving Harry. Her harsh words and cruel assumptions built slowly, layer upon layer, until finally Harry's emotions rippled outward in a burst of uncontrolled magic. Marge began inflating like a balloon, drifting upward toward the ceiling as the room spun into chaos. In the silence that followed, Harry felt something he rarely allowed himself, anger mixed with a sense of self he could no longer bend to fit the Dursleys' narrow world. He slipped out into the night, wand in hand, half expecting disaster to strike. Instead, a double-decker purple bus screeched to a stop in front of him, its windows gleaming with that unmistakable wizarding glow. The night bus whisked him into the wizarding world once more, its beds rattling softly, with each sudden turn and its lamps flickering like sleepy fireflies. When Harry finally arrived at the leaky cauldron, safe beneath its cozy, ancient roof beams, it felt as though he had stepped back into the place where he truly belonged. But comfort was short-lived. A prisoner named Sirius Black had escaped from Azkaban, stirring fear across the entire wizarding community. Whispers followed Harry wherever he went, suggesting that Black was hunting him. Yet as Harry returned to Hogwarts for his third year, the castle, timeless and enigmatic, welcomed him with the familiar sense of protection. This year, the guards sent to protect the school brought a coldness no one expected. Dementors, cloaked figures that drained warmth and happiness from the air around them, patrolled the grounds. Their presence chilled Harry more deeply than it did anyone else, as if the darkness they carried recognized him. Still, school life continued in its quiet rhythm. Hogsmeade visits brought the scent of butterbeer drifting through tiny shops. Professor Lupin offered lessons with a kindness Harry hadn't known he was missing, teaching him to defend himself against the very fear that sought to overwhelm him. Slowly, truths began unraveling. Sirius Black was not the traitor everyone believed him to be. He was Harry's godfather, the only person left who had loved his parents as fiercely as Harry longed to know them. The real betrayer was Peter Pettigrew, disguised for years as Ron's pet rat. In one night's chaos beneath the Whomping Willow, loyalties flipped, identities shattered, and Harry felt hope flicker, hope that he might finally have a family. But life has its own currents, and Sirius slipped from Harry's grasp just as quickly as he had appeared. At the lake's edge, surrounded by Dementors, Harry watched as his younger self cast a powerful Patronus, a luminous stag that burst forward with radiant strength. Time folded in on itself through the time-turner, revealing Harry's own capacity for magic, far beyond what he believed possible. Though the year ended with Sirius free but far away, there was a quiet bond between them now, a thread of belonging that would never completely fade. Harry returned to Privet Drive that summer with a lighter heart, holding a letter from Sirius that promised better days ahead. Yet the calm did not last. When Harry attended the Quidditch World Cup with the Weasleys, the night sky erupted in a display of fear. The dark mark, Voldemort's symbol, glowed above the trees, sending tremors through the magical world. Something ancient and dangerous had awakened once more, and though the breeze carried no words, it was clear the wizarding world was shifting again. Back at Hogwarts, Excitement buzzed through the halls as the Tri-Wizard Tournament was announced. A legendary competition returning after more than a century. Schools from across Europe arrived, bringing students with extraordinary skill and presence. But when Harry's name emerged unexpectedly from the Goblet of Fire, the castle seemed to hold its breath. Harry felt isolated in a way he had not felt before. Whispers spread, friendships strained, and even the magical world itself felt unsure of him. Yet he faced each challenge with quiet bravery. Dragons circling overhead, tasks hidden beneath the lake's surface, mysteries twisting through every corridor. But the final task changed everything. In the darkness of the graveyard, surrounded by cold stone and whispering shadows, Voldemort returned, fully, terrifyingly alive. Harry had seen Death Eaters before, only as rumors, names in books. Now he stood before them, wand burning in his hand as Voldemort's power surged like a storm. Their wands connected, light tangled with memory, and Harry escaped only by the smallest miracle, carrying Cedric Diggory's lifeless body back to the world that had no idea what awaited it. The Tri-Wizard Tournament ended in silence, with the truth hanging heavily in the air. Voldemort was back, and the wizarding world would never again know the peace it once did. The return to Hogwarts after that terrible night felt different from any year before. Whispers no longer carried playful speculation. They carried fear, confusion, and the lingering echo of Voldemort's name. Ministry officials hurried through the corridors, refusing to believe the truth Harry had witnessed with his own eyes. The castle seemed to sense the shift as well. Its walls, once filled with laughter and warm anticipation, now felt older, heavier, as though memories of past wars were beginning to stir awake. Harry entered his 5th year with a heart full of worry and a world unwilling to listen. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic, clung desperately to denial. He refused to accept Dumbledore's warnings, afraid that acknowledging Voldemort's return would unravel the fragile stability he had built. The Ministry's fear trickled down into Hogwarts in the form of a new defense against the dark arts professor, Dolores Umbridge. Her sweet, sugary voice masked a coldness that seeped into every classroom. She rewrote lessons, silenced truths, and carved her power into the school with a smile that never reached her eyes. As rules multiplied and punishments grew crueler, a quiet resistance began to form. In an empty room hidden behind layers of magic, students gathered in secret. They came not for rebellion, but for hope. Harry taught them everything he knew. How to cast defensive spells, how to stand together when darkness pressed in, how to believe in themselves even when the world refused to believe them. The group called itself Dumbledore's Army, and in that room, lit by soft candlelight and walls that reshaped themselves as needed, students rediscovered their courage. But the year was not only about resistance. Harry felt a deeper, more personal loneliness unfolding within him. Strange dreams drew him into Voldemort's thoughts, leading him through dark corridors and visions he didn't understand. The connection between them was strengthening, something neither of them fully controlled. It became a burden Harry carried quietly, afraid it meant there was something wrong with him, something dangerous inside him. The year built slowly toward a breaking point. When Harry saw a vision of Sirius in danger, he rushed to the Ministry of Magic with Ron, Hermione, Luna, Neville, and Ginny by his side. The corridors of the Department of Mysteries felt endless, whispering through vast halls filled with mysteries older than any wizard alive. They searched for Sirius only to uncover a trap carefully set by Voldemort. Death Eaters closed in, and for the first time, Harry and his friends fought not as children, but as young witches and wizards standing against the darkness. Help came in the form of the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's closest allies, but battle had already left its mark. In the chaos, Sirius fell through the ancient veil, disappearing from the world in a moment too quiet for the weight it carried. Harry's grief rippled through the room, sharp and real. For the second time in his life, the promise of family had slipped away from him, leaving an ache that would not fade quickly. What followed was a confrontation between Dumbledore and Voldemort, a duel that shook the very air of the Ministry. And when it ended, the truth could no longer be denied. Voldemort lived, and the wizarding world finally opened its eyes to the shadow returning. Harry returned to Hogwarts, carrying the heavy knowledge that the path ahead would only grow more difficult. Dumbledore gently explained the prophecy that had shaped Harry's life before he even knew magic existed, the prophecy that tied him forever to Voldemort. One could not live while the other survived. It was a truth that settled into Harry's heart like a quiet storm. Yet even in the growing darkness, there were lights. The castle remained full of students who believed in him. The Weasleys welcomed him with warmth. Hermione and Ron stayed by his side, steady as ever. Hogwarts, despite its shifting tides, still felt like a home. And so the first phase of Harry's journey came to a close. He had faced monsters hidden beneath the school, truths buried in the past, and dangers rising in the present. He had felt loss, love, fear, and courage woven into the fabric of every year. But the story was only beginning to reveal its deepest layers. Ahead lay ancient secrets, the unraveling of dark magic, and the weight of choices that would shape not only his fate, but the fate of the entire wizarding world. As the castle settled into another quiet summer, Harry prepared, perhaps without even realizing it, for the turning point of his life, the moment when childhood slipped quietly behind him and the storm of destiny rose on the horizon. When Harry returned to Hogwarts for his 6th year, the world he stepped back into felt changed, not abruptly, but in a way that crept along the edges of daily life like a shifting wind. The Ministry had finally admitted the truth of Voldemort's return, and that acknowledgement settled across the wizarding community with equal parts fear and determination. Posters, warnings, and silent worries filled the streets of Diagon Alley. Families whispered about disappearances. Shops that once glowed with magic now shuttered their windows early, as if night itself had grown heavier. Yet Hogwarts, ancient and steadfast, remained a sanctuary. The castle welcomed Harry with familiar warmth, though even here the air felt different. Security measures tightened, aurors patrolled the grounds, and a sense of quiet vigilance lingered between the walls. Still, the great hall gleamed with candles. Laughter drifted from the common rooms, and lessons unfolded with the steady patience of professors who had weathered storms before. This was the year Dumbledore drew Harry closer, not as a student merely following lessons, but as someone entrusted with truths too heavy for most to carry. Their meetings in the headmaster's office became a gentle rhythm in Harry's life, each one unfolding like a chapter from a long, hidden book. Together they peered into the pensieve, watching memories ripple outward like silver water. These moments offered glimpses into Voldemort's past, once a lonely boy named Tom Riddle, sharp-eyed and brilliant, growing slowly into the dark force that now threatened their world. These lessons were not dramatic or rushed. They were thoughtful, revealing how darkness rarely arrives suddenly. Instead, it grows in quiet corners, in choices made without kindness, in a hunger for power that blinds itself to love. Harry listened, learning not only about Voldemort, but about the fragile threads that bind every life, good or evil, to the world around it. But school life didn't pause for the shadows rising beyond its walls. There were Quidditch trials, snowy afternoons in Hogsmeade, and moments of awkwardness and warmth as new feelings stirred between students. Ron found himself pulled suddenly into the spotlight, becoming Gryffindor's keeper and discovering both confidence and chaos. Hermione wrestled with emotions she tried so desperately to hide behind her cleverness. And Harry found himself drawn, slowly and quietly, toward Ginny Weasley, their connection unfolding in glances and unspoken understanding. Yet beneath the surface of these normal teenage moments, darker currents flowed. Draco Malfoy, once loud with arrogant certainty, moved now with a quiet, frantic urgency. His face looked thinner, his eyes shadowed. Harry sensed something was wrong, though he struggled to convince anyone else. Draco had been given a task, one beyond his years, impossible in its weight, and he carried it alone, step by trembling step. Slughorn's return brought a different kind of mystery. Among his potions, shelves, and warm, boastful stories, there hid a memory that Dumbledore desperately needed, a memory altered by fear, a memory that held the truth about Horcruxes, dark objects into which Voldemort had placed pieces of his soul. Understanding them was the only way to understand the path ahead, and so Harry sought the truth gently, patiently, until the real memory revealed itself like a long-awaited sunrise. As the year crept onward, Harry felt time folding around him, pressing him toward moments he did not yet understand. The castle's corridors seemed to whisper of events drawing near, of a choice that would shape everything that followed. And though he did not yet know it, the boundaries between youth and the responsibilities of a hero were blurring, merging quietly with each step he took. The holidays drifted in quietly that year, wrapping Hogwarts in a blanket of snow that softened every stone pathway and muffled every hurried footstep. Inside the castle, the warmth of floating candles and fires burning in long ancient hearths made everything feel more peaceful than Harry had ever known. Yet beneath that softness, something darker was stirring. Whispers about the Chamber of Secrets had begun to slip through corridors the same way cold drafts did, unexpected, unsettling, impossible to ignore. Harry felt it first as a faint echo, a voice only he could hear, slithering along the walls like it had a mind of its own. It hissed threats about tearing, ripping, and killing. And though he tried to convince himself he'd imagined it, the truth lingered like fog. Something inside Hogwarts was waking up. Students soon found themselves face to face with the terrifying evidence. One by one, they were discovered petrified, frozen, mid-expression, eyes wide as though they'd stared into something too horrible for words. Teachers rushed to hush fear from spreading, but it drifted anyway, woven into the very air of the great hall. Even the bravest students fell quiet when passing shadowed corners. As suspicions rose, fingers pointed at Harry. Even some classmates wondered how he kept appearing near the scenes of the attacks. Harry felt the weight of their stares like winter settling on his shoulders. Only Ron and Hermione stood beside him, refusing to doubt him for a moment. Together they pressed deeper into the mystery than any student should have dared. Hermione, carrying her endless desire to understand the world around her, spent countless late hours in the library. Ron tried to lighten the mood with jokes that barely hid his own fear, while Harry continued hearing the chilling voice curling around the castle's stone heart. Bit by bit, their search led them back into the labyrinth of Hogwarts' past, into old stories about a hidden chamber built by Salazar Slytherin himself, a secret that held a creature capable of cleansing the school of those he deemed unworthy. Then came the day Hermione didn't return from the library. When she finally was found, she too had been petrified, frozen still as marble. The sight of her struck Harry and Ron like a blow, silencing the noise of the world around them. In her rigid hand, clutched tight even in her petrified state, was the corner of a page torn from a book, a clue she'd discovered in her final moments before the attack. It mentioned a creature, one so deadly that its gaze alone could kill, the basilisk. Everything fell into place. The voice Harry had been hearing wasn't magic, madness, or imagination. It was the hiss of a serpent, moving through pipes beneath the school, and the creature's master, the one opening the chamber, was linked somehow to the heir of Slytherin. Before the truth could settle, another terrible message appeared on the wall. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. Ginny Weasley had been taken, and with that the time for fear ended. The time for action began. Professor Lockhart, with his perfect hair and trembling confidence, stepped forward to save the day, as he phrased it. But Harry and Ron already sensed that the truth behind his stories was far thinner than the smile he wore. When McGonagall ordered Lockhart to rescue Ginny from the Chamber of Secrets, the boys exchanged a look, half disbelief, half understanding, and decided to act. They couldn't let Ginny remain trapped. They couldn't allow Hogwarts to fall deeper into fear, and deep down, Harry knew this was something he was meant to face. They cornered Lockhart in his office, where he was hurriedly stuffing his belongings into a suitcase, clearly ready to flee rather than fight. The boys forced him to come along, their wands pointed with more courage than skill, and together they followed the clues Hermione had left behind. It led them to the entrance of the chamber itself, hidden behind the whispering coils of a monstrous stone serpent in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. With a trembling breath, Harry spoke in parcel tongue, the strange language that slipped from him like instinct, and the sink began to twist downward, opening into a dark tunnel. The descent felt endless. The slide into the depths of Hogwarts spat them into cold, ancient stone passages filled with bones and silence. Lockhart shook so badly that even Ron looked steadier beside him. Then, in a sharp turn of cowardice, Lockhart snatched Ron's wand, proclaiming he would erase their memories and escape as a hero. But the wand backfired disastrously, sending a blast of rock through the tunnel, collapsing the path and separating Ron from Harry. Even worse, Lockhart's own memories shattered into confused emptiness. With Ron stuck behind the rubble, Harry pressed forward alone. The chamber was like stepping into another world, one carved by time, shadows, and prejudice. Giant stone serpents lined the walls, and at the far end stood an enormous statue of Salazar Slytherin himself. In the eerie stillness, Harry spotted Ginny's small, motionless form lying on the cold stone floor. Kneeling beside her, he felt her slipping further away, her life fading like a candle losing its glow. Then, from the shadows, stepped Tom Riddle. At first, he looked like an ordinary boy, quiet, calm, almost polite. But there was something chilling beneath his smile, something empty and hungry. Bit by bit, his words peeled back the truth. He wasn't just a memory. He was a piece of Voldemort preserved in a diary, feeding on Ginny's fear and secrets. With every page she wrote, he grew stronger until he could control her completely. It was he who opened the chamber, he who commanded the basilisk, he who longed to return to his full, terrible power. The basilisk responded to his call. It slithered from the darkness with a sound like stone scraping over stone, scales shimmering in a sickly green hue. Harry's breath tightened. He knew one direct look could kill him. He listened for movement, for the ripple of scales, guiding his survival more by instinct than by sight. Then, in a moment that felt like magic meeting destiny, Fawkes the Phoenix appeared above him, dropping the sorting hat at Harry's feet. Fawkes' tears healed, his light guided, and his courage danced like fire in the dark. And the basilisk struck. Harry felt the weight of the serpent's gaze as it lunged, but instinct and Fawkes' guidance moved him in time. The sword of Godric Gryffindor emerged from the sorting hat, gleaming with purpose, and in one fluid motion, Harry drove it into the basilisk's heart. The great serpent fell, its body collapsing with a final, shuddering hiss that echoed through the chamber like a fading storm. The danger was over, but the echoes of fear lingered. Then Harry turned to Tom Riddle, whose form flickered like a reflection in disturbed water. With a quiet determination, Harry plunged the basilisk fang into the diary. Riddle shrieked and vanished, leaving behind only the pages he had once controlled. Ginny stirred, her eyes opening softly, unafraid, as though she had been floating in a dream that Harry had pulled her back from. Relief washed over him like warm sunlight, spreading slowly through the darkened chamber. By the time they returned to the surface, Hogwarts had begun to feel like home once again. Life resumed its rhythm, not immediately, but gently, with cautious laughter and quiet excitement. The students celebrated the courage of those who had faced the chamber, though Harry and his friends never sought praise. It was enough that the danger had ended and that those they cared for were safe. The months following that adventure carried softer challenges. Quidditch matches, exams, the small and ordinary moments that grounded the extraordinary. Yet the wizarding world was restless, aware that Voldemort's return was a shadow that could no longer be ignored. Across Europe, dark movements stirred, alliances formed and shifted, and whispers of unrest reached even the calmest corners of Hogwarts. Harry felt it in his bones, a subtle tremor that never quite disappeared, a reminder that the world outside the castle walls was moving towards something inevitable. In the summer before his 4th year, Harry's life was punctuated by excitement and unease. He traveled with the Weasleys to the Quidditch World Cup, where magic danced across the sky and cheers filled the air. For a moment, everything seemed bright, carefree, and alive. But then the night sky changed. The dark mark, Voldemort's emblem, burned above the trees, dark and ominous. Panic rippled through the crowds as Death Eaters spread terror, a reminder that the world Harry had fought so hard to understand was becoming dangerous in ways no young wizard could fully grasp. Returning to Hogwarts for the Triwizard Tournament, Harry was no longer the same boy who had first stepped onto the train years ago. He was older, wiser, and quieter, carrying the weight of battles fought, friends lost, and a world that refused to remain simple. He faced dragons, enchanted lakes, and puzzles that challenged both his mind and courage. And when the final task led him to the graveyard where Cedric Diggory lay still and Voldemort rose fully again, Harry glimpsed the true scale of the darkness he would confront. Not just as a student, not just as a boy, but as someone tied irrevocably to the fate of the wizarding world. And so the turning of time had begun. Harry returned to Hogwarts, scarred, determined, and aware that the calm of childhood had ended. The world he had known was shifting toward a future filled with choices, sacrifice, and battles that would stretch far beyond the safety of the castle walls. Yet even in the uncertainty, the light of friendship, courage, and love remained, a quiet force ready to guide him through the challenges yet to come. The summer before Harry's 6th year carried a quiet heaviness. Privet Drive felt smaller than ever, its green lawns and neat fences suffocating in their familiarity. Harry wandered through the days, half absorbed in the lingering memories of the battles and revelations from his 4th and 5th years. Letters from friends arrived softly, carrying warmth, yet hints of tension threaded through them. A sense that the magical world was shifting in ways he could feel but not yet understand. Dark times were approaching, and even the calmest moments carried shadows. Returning to Hogwarts that year, Harry noticed subtle changes that hinted at the new challenges ahead. The castle's stones seemed colder in some corridors, and in the library, whispers of Voldemort's past echoed faintly between rows of books. Dumbledore, ever patient and deliberate, met Harry not as a teacher, but as a guide entrusted with the heaviest of truths. They climbed the spiraling staircase to the headmaster's office, the wind of their steps carrying the weight of anticipation. For weeks they pored over the past together, exploring memories preserved in delicate pensive globes. with every silver ripple in the liquid. Harry saw Voldemort not as the monster he had fought before, but as a boy shaped by abandonment, hunger for power, and an unyielding desire to overcome death. These lessons were slow, intentional, like uncovering the layers of an ancient painting. They revealed the creation of Horcruxes, objects in which Voldemort had hidden fragments of his soul to anchor himself against mortality. Each discovery made Harry's chest tighten, not with fear, but with understanding. An understanding of what must be undone, what courage must be summoned, and what responsibility he bore. The enormity of it all pressed gently against his mind, but Dumbledore's calm presence made it bearable, a lantern in the shadows. Life at Hogwarts continued in quiet rhythms, though now the corridors carried more tension than in years past. Students whispered about exams and old rivalries, but the true currents of unease flowed beneath the surface. Draco Malfoy moved through the halls with a restless energy, shoulders tight, eyes darting as though carrying secrets too heavy for his age. Harry sensed that Draco's actions were part of something larger, a thread that pulled toward a storm neither of them fully understood. And yet, amidst the undercurrents of danger, there were moments of warmth. Ron, Hermione, and Harry shared laughter over simple meals, whispered confidences in the common room, and occasional stolen walks through moonlit courtyards where magic and friendship blended into a sense of safety, however fleeting. Potions classes brought their own quiet discoveries. Slughorn, with his endless stories and soft praises, introduced Harry to a world of subtlety and magic, ingredients that shimmered differently depending on intention, techniques that could strengthen or destroy depending on care. One particular textbook, worn and annotated in spidery handwriting, revealed to Harry secrets of spells and potions that felt as though they were meant for him alone. It carried the mark of the Half-Blood Prince, a mystery that intrigued him with each scribbled note, each tiny advantage in his studies. With it, Harry's skills grew, not through force or arrogance, but through curiosity and careful attention to detail. Even amidst these lessons, the shadow of Voldemort's return pressed softly but persistently. News from the wider wizarding world brought whispers of unrest, sightings of Death Eaters, and the subtle movement of dark powers. Harry knew instinctively that the next phase of his journey would demand more than bravery. It would require discernment, patience, and an understanding of choices, of human hearts shaped by both love and cruelty. And as the days passed, Harry began to see the quiet threads linking the past to the present. The way Voldemort's childhood shaped him, the marks left by family and loss, and the hidden patterns that foretold the path he himself must follow. Hogwarts, as it always had, remained a place of learning, safety, and discovery. But it was also becoming the stage for truths that would soon test Harry in ways he had never imagined. The autumn at Hogwarts that year settled with a quiet intensity. Leaves tumbled gently from the castle's ancient trees, spinning like golden sparks through the crisp air, and the students moved along the corridors with a mixture of excitement and caution. Beneath the ordinary rhythm of classes, friendships, and the occasional prank, Harry felt the constant pull of larger, unseen currents. He and Dumbledore spent more time together, each lesson in the headmaster's office revealing the weight of choices and the depth of darkness that had grown over the years. Through the pensieve, Harry explored the formative memories of Tom Riddle, each one a piece of a puzzle that revealed the making of the wizard who had once terrorized the world and now sought to return. He saw the boy's intelligence and charm, but also his growing cruelty, his obsession with bloodlines, and his fascination with immortality. Dumbledore explained with gentle gravity that understanding the enemy was the first step toward defeating him. Harry listened intently. absorbing the knowledge without panic, letting it settle into his mind like a soft, unwavering light. Outside of these lessons, Hogwarts continued its quiet hum of life. Students laughed in the corridors, lanterns flickered over polished floors, and the faint scent of pumpkin pasties drifted from the kitchens. Yet tension threaded through even these small comforts. Draco Malfoy grew more withdrawn, shadowed with a purpose Harry could not yet discern. Even the whispers of students, some subtle, some outright, carried fear about what was unfolding beyond the castle walls. Death Eaters had become more active, and the wizarding world was inching closer to open confrontation. Harry, Ron, and Hermione felt the weight of it all, but their friendship remained steadfast, a quiet anchor amid the rising tide of uncertainty. One evening, Dumbledore led Harry to a hidden alcove on the castle grounds. The air was crisp and still, carrying a faint scent of the lake and the distant forest. There, Dumbledore explained the nature of Horcruxes, objects in which Voldemort had hidden fragments of his soul to anchor himself against death. Each Horcrux was a piece of him, a tether keeping him bound to the world of the living. Destroying them would be no simple task. It required courage, knowledge, and careful planning. Harry felt the weight of this responsibility settle on his shoulders, but Dumbledore's calm presence assured him that he would not face it alone. In the weeks that followed, Harry's studies in potions, spells, and magical theory became intertwined with the discovery of secrets in the Half-Blood Prince's annotated textbook. Each note, each margin comment, revealed techniques and insights that gave him a quiet confidence. He practiced in the dim light of the common room, careful not to draw attention, and felt a growing sense of control over his own magical abilities. It was a delicate balance, this mingling of knowledge and responsibility, preparing for the dangers ahead without letting fear consume the present. Even in the midst of growing darkness, Hogwarts offered moments of ordinary magic. The laughter of friends over a game of wizard chess, the soft glow of candlelight during evening meals, and quiet walks along the lake all carried reminders that life, even in uncertain times, could hold beauty and warmth. These moments grounded Harry, giving him the strength to face the shadows, to understand the past, and to prepare for the choices that would soon shape the future. And so, as the days turned slowly toward winter, Harry felt the castle settle around him like a living being, watchful, protective, and quietly aware of the storm that would soon descend. Every whispered conversation, every flicker of movement in the corridors, carried the promise of change. Hogwarts, with its secret passageways and timeless halls, was becoming not only a sanctuary, but also a stage for the truths and trials that would define the path ahead. The shadows were gathering, but in them, Harry glimpsed the first sparks of courage that would guide him through what was to come. As the winter deepened, Hogwarts seemed to huddle under its own history, each stone of the castle bearing witness to the quiet unfolding of destiny. Harry spent long hours with Dumbledore, moving from one memory to the next, tracing the threads of Voldemort's life with careful attention. Each step revealed not only the darkness in the wizard he was meant to defeat, but also glimpses of the boy he might have been, alone, neglected, and craving love. It was a truth both chilling and sad, and it pressed on Harry's heart, teaching him that courage often grew in the quietest spaces, not the loudest battles. Outside these lessons, Hogwarts carried its own rhythm. Quidditch practices continued with their steady excitement. Students whispered in the corridors about the Half-Blood Prince's remarkable spells and the daring ways Harry seemed to excel. But alongside these ordinary experiences, the tension in the castle became tangible. Draco Malfoy moved like a shadow through hallways, never idle, always watching, always calculating. There was something in his eyes, a fear masked by arrogance, that Harry could not ignore. He sensed that Draco's actions were connected to a plan darker than any teenage prank. It was the first time Harry understood that evil could operate quietly, invisibly, like a slow-moving current beneath calm water. Meanwhile, Harry and Dumbledore began the careful work of uncovering Voldemort's Horcruxes. Each one required knowledge, patience, and strategy, for they were protected by magic older than Hogwarts itself. They retrieved memories, sought answers, and traveled far beyond the castle grounds to hidden places where secrets of the past slumbered, waiting to be discovered. In these journeys, Harry learned not only about Voldemort's cunning, but also about human vulnerability, the ways fear and pride and grief could twist hearts. He came to see that every act of courage, however small, held power far beyond what anyone could measure. As the days passed, Harry's connection to the Half-Blood Prince's book deepened. Spells he once found difficult became second nature. Potion-making flowed more smoothly, and he found himself understanding magic in subtle, profound ways. Yet there was a cost. Power, even when used with good intentions, demanded responsibility, and Harry felt the weight of each choice pressing on him. Every triumph, every mastery reminded him that his path was no longer only about learning, but about preparing for the unavoidable confrontation with Voldemort. The castle itself seemed to sense the growing storm. Corridors that were once familiar now carried whispers of unease, and even the portraits seemed more watchful, their eyes lingering longer than before. Students felt it too, a subtle shift in the air, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The dark forces beyond Hogwarts were becoming bolder, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione realized that protection and strategy could no longer wait. They studied, they prepared, and they relied on the quiet strength of their friendship to carry them through each day. And then the unthinkable happened. Dumbledore, who had been Harry's guide, mentor, and protector through every challenge, was called away under false pretenses. The castle fell into a tense silence. Death Eaters, long hidden in shadows, struck with sudden precision. And in the highest tower, bathed in the cold silver light of the moon, Harry watched the moment unfold that would change everything. Dumbledore fell. The castle shook with grief, the echoes of magic and loss intertwined, and Harry felt a hollowness spread through him, a quiet ache that no spell could mend. It was the first of many reminders that courage often demands sacrifice, and that loss is inseparable from the path of those who face darkness. Even as the school year ended, Hogwarts never truly returned to its previous calm. Students whispered in muted tones, while Harry, Ron, and Hermione contemplated the road ahead. The Horcruxes remained, hidden and dangerous, and Voldemort's reach continued to grow. Yet within Harry, a quiet determination had taken root, a seed nurtured by Dumbledore's wisdom, the steadfastness of friends, and the resilience forged through trials too heavy for any one boy to bear alone. The castle, for all its shadows, remained a place of learning, reflection, and quiet courage. It was preparing him for what was yet to come. The aftermath of Dumbledore's death cast a quiet, heavy shadow over Hogwarts. The castle, which had always been a sanctuary, seemed subdued, as if mourning along with its students. Candles flickered in the great hall with a softer light. Portraits whispered more slowly, and the corridors felt emptier, the echoes of footsteps carrying a weight they never had before. Harry moved through it all with a sense of loss that was both profound and isolating. Yet beneath it burned a quiet determination, a recognition that he could not rely on anyone else to complete the work that now rested on his shoulders. Returning to the familiar rhythms of Hogwarts was impossible. Even ordinary classes felt hollow, filled with the quiet reminder of absence. Ron and Hermione stayed close, their presence steady and grounding, helping Harry navigate the uncertainty that stretched before him. Together they spoke in whispers, planned in corners, and allowed the castle to shelter them from a world increasingly aware of Voldemort's return. The weight of expectation and responsibility was now shared, not lightly, but with a bond forged through years of loyalty, courage, and shared secrets. Yet there was no pause. The task before Harry was enormous, locating and destroying the remaining Horcruxes, the fragments of Voldemort's soul that ensured his unnatural survival. Dumbledore's final instructions had been clear, but they were intentionally incomplete, for the headmaster understood that the journey could only be walked by those who were willing to face danger, uncertainty, and sacrifice. Harry and his friends prepared quietly, gathering information, planning, and learning the subtle clues left in old texts and whispered stories. Each discovery, no matter how small, was a step toward understanding the path ahead. The wizarding world beyond Hogwarts was changing too. The Ministry of Magic, still reeling from denial and fear, struggled to contain the rising tide of Death Eater influence. Rumors circulated in hidden corners, families displaced, dark marks seen in the night, and fear that Voldemort's power was growing beyond containment. It was a time when trust became precious, rare, and fragile, and Harry learned to measure each word, each gesture, with care. Alliances mattered, and loyalty became a shield as much as any wand. Amid the weight of these responsibilities, there were moments of quiet humanity. Conversations in the glow of firelight, the shared comfort of simple meals, and the unspoken reassurance of friends offered solace. Harry and Ginny's bond grew gently, a quiet thread of warmth woven through the fabric of darker days. Ron and Hermione remained the steady heartbeat of their small circle, reminding Harry that courage did not exist in isolation, but in the quiet commitment to those you care for and protect. By the end of the year, Hogwarts had become a crucible, shaping Harry and his friends with lessons no classroom could teach. The castle, with its shifting staircases and secret rooms, its ghosts and history, stood witness to bravery, grief, and the growing understanding that the final confrontation was approaching. The shadows that had always lingered were now closer, pressing in with an urgency that could not be ignored. Yet in the midst of loss and fear, a quiet truth endured. Courage is born in moments of choice, and love, steadfast and patient, remains the most enduring form of magic. And so the 6th year closed not with celebration, but with resolve. Harry, carrying both grief and determination, left the castle knowing that the path ahead would demand everything he had, every ounce of courage, wisdom, and trust in those who walked beside him. The journey into the unknown, the pursuit of Horcruxes, and the ultimate confrontation with Voldemort waited just beyond the horizon. Hogwarts had taught him well, prepared him quietly, and now it was time for the next chapter to unfold. The story was nearing its climax, and the magic of choice, sacrifice, and destiny was ready to guide him toward the final battle. The summer before Harry's 7th year felt unlike any other. Hogwarts remained closed, and the streets of Diagon Alley hummed with the ordinary bustle of wizarding life. Yet an unspoken tension lingered like a low, persistent wind. Families whispered in shadowed corners about missing wizards, Death Eater activity, and the unstoppable rise of Voldemort's power. Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved through this world with quiet determination, carrying only what they could manage in bags and hearts full of heavy responsibility. There was no return to school. There were no comforting routines. The path before them was uncertain, dangerous, and utterly theirs to walk. Their journey began immediately, guided by Dumbledore's careful planning and the fragments of knowledge he had left behind. Each step required patience and subtlety. The first Horcruxes had to be located and destroyed. Hidden objects of immense power, each tied intimately to Voldemort's very soul. The stakes were enormous, and failure could mean not only death, but the rise of darkness unchecked. Every choice carried weight. Every misstep could change the world forever. Traveling through the countryside and magical hideaways, Harry, Ron, and Hermione faced challenges both practical and personal. They had to move in secrecy, avoiding detection by Death Eaters and traitors alike. They relied on clever spells, disguises, and the loyalty of those willing to risk everything. Along the way, the trio learned not only about the enemy, but also about themselves, the depth of their courage, the resilience of their bond, and the quiet power of love and friendship that had carried them through years of trials. In the solitude of their journey, Harry reflected on the lessons of the past. The losses he had endured, the deaths of loved ones, the moments of helplessness, the weight of prophecy, had all prepared him for this final chapter. Each memory, each encounter became a guide, a subtle whisper of what courage truly meant. The world beyond Hogwarts was harsher, but it also revealed the quiet beauty of loyalty, bravery, and the sacrifices people make to protect what they love. The Horcrux hunt led them across England, through ancient forests, abandoned houses, and places where dark magic lingered like a shadow in the air. Each destruction of a Horcrux was not a simple victory. It carried the weight of the soul within it, leaving a quiet ache, a reminder of the cost of evil and the price of restoring balance. Harry understood that defeating Voldemort required more than power. It required understanding, patience, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right, even when the path was uncertain. Yet even amidst danger, moments of warmth and humanity persisted. Shared meals under flickering candlelight, quiet conversations about childhood memories, and the steady presence of friends created soft spaces amid the chaos. Ginny's letters, Ron's steady humor, and Hermione's unwavering support were anchors in the storm, reminding Harry that even in the darkest times, bonds of love and trust could endure. These moments, small and gentle, became essential threads holding them together, softening the weight of responsibility without diminishing its urgency. As autumn waned, the world around them shifted further. Voldemort's influence spread like a creeping shadow, enveloping villages, towns, and even the ministry itself. Propaganda, fear, and intimidation reshaped the lives of ordinary wizards. Those who resisted went into hiding, their courage hidden beneath quiet routines and careful planning. The sense of inevitability pressed on Harry, a reminder that the ultimate confrontation would not wait. The destiny had long since begun marching forward, carrying him toward the challenges that would define not just his life, but the fate of the entire magical world. The Horcrux hunt tested them in ways that no classroom could have prepared them for. Each clue they uncovered, each object destroyed, felt like a small victory, yet carried with it a haunting weight. Voldemort's soul fragments had been deliberately hidden, steeped in protections both magical and psychological. Destroying one Horcrux often brought pain, confusion, and exhaustion, reminding Harry and his friends that the fight against darkness was never simple. Yet they pressed on, step by step, relying on each other's courage, cleverness, and unwavering trust. In those quiet, tense moments, their friendship became more than companionship. It became a lifeline. Their journey also revealed unexpected allies, people who risked everything to help them. Members of the Order of the Phoenix, old professors, and even those once hesitant to resist Voldemort's growing power offered guidance, shelter, and counsel. These brief encounters, often hurried and whispered, reminded Harry of the quiet strength present even in those who seemed ordinary. Courage, he realized, was not always loud. Sometimes it existed in silent acts of defiance, in staying hidden to protect others and in choosing to act when the world was asleep with fear. Amid the urgency of their mission, the trio's bond deepened. Long nights around small fires, sharing food and stories, strengthened their connection and revealed the profound trust they had cultivated over years of shared danger. Ron's humor, often impulsive but deeply loyal, kept spirits from fracturing. Hermione's careful planning, intelligence, and foresight guided them through treacherous paths, and Harry, carrying the weight of prophecy, grief, and responsibility, learned that leadership was not about command, but about listening, understanding, and acting with conviction. Together, they formed a delicate, unbreakable balance that carried them safely through threats both seen and hidden. Yet even with these comforts, the shadow of loss remained. Every step toward the Horcruxes reminded them of what was at stake, the loved ones already lost, and the darkness looming on the horizon. Voldemort's reach was growing, seeping into every corner of the wizarding world. Families were torn apart, friends were forced into hiding, and the magical community itself seemed on the brink of collapse. Harry understood that the fight was not only about confronting Voldemort, but also about preserving the courage and humanity that darkness sought to destroy. As winter approached, their journey brought them closer to Hogwarts, the place that had shaped them, protected them, and tested them. They returned with the knowledge that the final battle was inevitable. The castle, silent yet filled with memories of laughter, courage, and loss, awaited them as both sanctuary and battlefield. Every corridor, every tower, every hidden chamber carried the echoes of past years, lessons learned, friendships forged, and sacrifices made. Harry felt the weight of all those memories as he moved through the familiar stones, realizing that he was no longer a student seeking knowledge, but a wizard preparing to face destiny. And so, with the Horcruxes identified but still in need of destruction, Harry, Ron, and Hermione readied themselves. The storm of confrontation was approaching, and the choices they made in the coming days would determine not just their own fate, but the fate of everyone they loved. Every shadow, every quiet moment, and every careful plan became part of the path leading to the final, defining moments of the wizarding world. Courage and love, fragile yet enduring, were the only forces strong enough to carry them through the darkness that awaited. Hogwarts, once a place of laughter, learning, and quiet magic, now braced itself for the storm it had long anticipated. Dark clouds gathered not only in the sky above, but in the corridors and towers of the castle, carrying the weight of a world at war. Students and staff prepared for battle in hushed urgency. Wands were polished, protective spells strengthened, and secret passageways memorized. Every face reflected a mixture of fear and determination. Every whisper carried hope and dread intertwined. Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked among them with quiet purpose, knowing the final confrontation was not a distant threat, but an immediate reality. The battle began with the sudden clash of spells and the sharp crackle of magic that split the night. Death Eaters moved like shadows, ruthless and relentless, striking with precision and cruelty. Students, professors, and members of the Order of the Phoenix rose to meet them with courage born of desperation and love. The castle, a living archive of centuries of magic, responded. Doors slammed shut to block intruders, staircases shifted to confound them, and portraits whispered guidance or warnings. Even in the chaos, Hogwarts itself seemed to protect its own, lending strength to those who fought for its preservation. Amid this maelstrom, Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved with quiet focus, seeking the Horcruxes that would make Voldemort mortal once more. Each object they found carried its own danger, its own history of dark magic and evil intent. Destroying a Horcrux was never simple. Each act left a lingering ache, a reminder of the fragments of soul they obliterated. Yet step by careful step they succeeded, their resolve unbroken even as the castle shook with the weight of spells cast in fury and fear. Loss touched them again. Brave friends fell, some in sudden flashes of violence, others in quiet moments of sacrifice. Yet even in grief there was a clarity. Every life given in defense of love, courage, and hope strengthened the resolve of those who remained. Harry learned that bravery is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. That sacrifice is not the end, but a torch passed quietly to those who continue the fight. And then, at last, Harry faced Voldemort. The two forces, light and dark, destiny and choice, converged in the heart of the castle. The battle was not only of spells and strength, but of will, courage, and understanding. Harry moved with the knowledge of every lesson, every loss, every friendship that had carried him. Through years of peril, he understood that Voldemort's power, immense as it was, relied on fear, on manipulation, and on the darkness of human hearts. Harry's strength came from love, loyalty, and the unyielding belief in the bonds he had forged. The final duel carried the weight of the world, echoing through the towers, corridors, and hidden rooms of Hogwarts, where the past and present collided in a crescendo of magic and destiny. And in the quiet spaces between spells, Harry felt the truth of everything he had learned. The world could be dark, frightening, and full of loss, but it was also full of courage, friendship, and love. Each act of kindness, each choice to stand for what was right, became part of a magic stronger than any curse, more enduring than any darkness. The final confrontation was not only a test of power, but a culmination of every lesson the castle, his friends, and his own heart had taught him. The final moments of the battle unfolded with quiet inevitability. Spells lit the sky and echoed through the castle, yet in the heart of it all, Harry moved with clarity and purpose. Every step, every breath, carried the lessons of the past, friendship, courage, and love, the quiet powers that had guided him through years of fear and uncertainty. He faced Voldemort not with hatred or rage, but with the calm certainty that darkness could never triumph where light persisted, even in the smallest, most subtle acts of bravery. Horcruxes destroyed, allies fallen or fighting fiercely, and the castle itself trembling with the force of conflict. Harry made his choice. He confronted Voldemort in the Great Hall, a place once filled with warmth and laughter, now filled with the tension of destiny. The duel that followed was precise, yet almost serene in its inevitability. Voldemort's magic, dark and furious, collided with Harry's calm certainty. The final curse that would have ended Harry's life instead rebounded, undone by the magic of selflessness, the unbroken bond between Harry and those he loved, and the lingering protection of sacrifices made over the years. In that moment, Voldemort fell, not with a roar of fire or a dramatic explosion, but quietly, irreversibly, the darkness collapsing under the weight of its own cruelty. The castle grew still as the echoes of battle faded. Survivors moved through the halls cautiously, tending to the wounded, comforting the frightened, and honoring the brave who had fallen. Harry walked among them, the weight on his shoulders slowly lifting, replaced with a quiet, profound relief. Hogwarts, battered yet resilient, seemed to breathe with him, its walls alive with the history of bravery, loss, and love that had guided him through every challenge. In the days that followed, life began to reclaim its rhythm. The wizarding world, freed from Voldemort's tyranny, moved slowly toward healing. Families reunited. whispers of hope replaced whispers of fear, and the quiet magic of everyday life returned to streets, homes, and hearts. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and those who had fought alongside them carried memories of loss and courage, understanding that the price of freedom is never small, but the value of love, friendship, and choice endures beyond any darkness. Years later, Harry stood with friends and family at King's Cross, watching the next generation of young witches and wizards begin their journey. The echoes of the past lingered in the stones of Hogwarts, the memories of bravery and sacrifice inscribed in every corner, yet the future shone bright with possibility. Choices made in darkness had been guided by light, love had proven stronger than hate, and courage had triumphed over fear. Harry understood that the story of his life was not simply about battles won or magic mastered, but about the quiet, enduring power of those willing to stand for what is right, no matter the cost. And so the tale of Harry Potter drew to its close, not with dramatic flourish, but with calm reflection, the gentle warmth of peace earned through trials, and the knowledge that even in the darkest of times, hope endures. The magic of friendship, courage, and love remains eternal and unshakable, a quiet force guiding every heart that chooses to believe in light. Hogwarts, with its towers and hidden rooms, its laughter and tears, its courage and sacrifice, stands as a living testament to that truth. And in the stillness that follows, the world breathes quietly, ready to continue, shaped forever by the choices of one boy who faced the darkness with unwavering heart. Good night, everyone.